First of all, I want to thank Terry for letting me bump him from the slot. And the way it was worded was um, a statement. This was going to be on what Quakers can do to support AISD families and staff. And I think that's very nice and definitive. However, for me, it feels more like a question. Like, what can Quakers do to support AISD family and staff? And because I feel like there have been many twists and turns that have not been supportive to the families, and I think from the administration to the staff. So I don't pretend to have any answers. If I did, I don't even know if we would have to be meeting. But I basically wanted to see and put on the table and be open and try to listen to what y'all's insights are. And what I see is that a need to identify the problem, first of all, and a need to discuss possible solutions, and what else did I say? Problems, solutions, inspirations, because for me, I need actions. So out of the solutions has to be like, how can we really act on them? And then the last one is what inspires, like how can we move forward with inspiration? And so those are kind of the queries, I guess, that I'm gonna put forward to you guys, and you can format them in the way you want to in your time frame. And you can ask your own queries. But for me, I think it's important to identify the problem, to look at possible solutions and actions, and to figure out how, at least on a personal level, and I would hope on a corporate level, how we are inspired, and what we can do to keep the faith.
I'll just share a few things from Peace and Social Concerns meeting on Friday of last week as well. Thanks, Claire, for that kind of framing. We were joined by Stephen Wright, who's a member of the Educate Austin School Board, and I'm going to drop a link into the chat to the school board's Take Action page, as well as Stephen's contact information. But one of the things that he pointed out is that the school district has backed off from their one-size-fits-all kind of approach, where all teachers 100% need to be in the classroom, even at those schools where only, say, 5% of the students are in the classroom. And now one of the solutions that the union has helped enable is principal by principal, they can make some decisions on their own class, their own school's basis, what might be an appropriate way forward. So that in the example he used, if you've got four third grade teachers and only a very small number of in-person third grade students, maybe you only need 2 on site and the other 2 might be teaching virtually. And all of those decisions are now being worked out one by one by principals. And so that's a benefit to the strong interaction by the union with the superintendent and the school board. But he also shared some actions that we all can take, even if we don't have students or personal connections with individual schools. And among the things that he suggested is that reaching out to school boards as concerned citizens is really important. And that they do, in fact, have the power to kind of push things in the right direction, even though they often don't want to feel like they're micromanaging. But the more they hear from people just sort of regular citizens who are concerned, um, the better. And so if you sign up for the list serve at the union, they'll let you know when the next school board meeting is, and you can sign up for 1 minute questions or statements. But also getting to know your own school board member is important, even if you don't have a student in the schools. And I'm just going to paste into the chat the board member list as well as the boundary map, because those of us without students in the schools don't necessarily know what boundary what school district we live in, school board district we live in. Anyway, those are a couple of things we learned from Stephen. Uh, I guess the last thing I'll share is on the kind of positive solution side. They filed a collective grievance on behalf of a number of union members who were able to teach remotely in the fall, but have been ordered back in the spring. And the school district is taking those collective grievances not as a body, but one by one, to kind of slow that process down, kind of a deliberate process to slow it all down. Um, but they're helping to negotiate on an individual basis with teachers. In some cases, they've been successful. In some cases, they haven't. But I guess I would share one other thing, which is that Claire has helped us know about things that we can do to be supportive, and that includes in the past letting Friends Meeting of Austin members and attenders know when those 1 minute messages could be recorded for the school board. And I think, Claire, you helped provide a little bit of a script, right?
Yes.
Um, and there may be other ways that we can help kind of moving forward as well. But that's sort of what I wanted to share from our Friday meeting.
I'd like to speak to the bit about principals, because I think that's giving way too much power to the principals, and kind of the principals can do what they want. And in the case of my principal, when I've sent her emails about what's happening, and what it's like to be in the classroom under the circumstances, she's like, thank you for sharing your feelings, but this is not the new teaching modality that you're teaching under. And so she has exactly 0% of understanding or agreement as to what it's like for the teachers in the classroom. And there is a focus, it seems like, on the union on middle and high school, because the numbers of people on the middle and high school level who go into the school is a lot smaller. So it's a lot easier for teachers to make the case in middle and high school that they should and can be able to work from home. Whereas even in my classroom, even though there's 3 to 6, that's still a minority who come in person. The classroom next door already has 9 kids or 10 kids, and that's with social distancing. I assume they're still doing that. Then they put on my shoulders the hardship. Well, what are we going to do with those 3 or 5 kids who do come into your classroom? We can't put them in the other kinder classroom because it's too crowded. And so they blame me for it, instead of what my perspective is. Well, what about these families that are bending over backwards and don't have a lot of resources, but they're bending over backwards to keep their kid at home? And they know that on the times that like for 8 weeks approximately, we were allowed to teach from home. And those at home learners know that the attention that I can give when my focus is 100% virtual is 100% better, because when I'm in the classroom, whether it's 2 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids, 10 kids, the focus has to be on preventing the spread of COVID. So it's all childcare. It's not, of course I'm trying to do lessons, but it's not That's all it is. And so when, you know, the middle and high school level, they don't need the childcare, they're staying home more often. And so it's still a mess as far as I'm concerned, as far as, you know, just saying, well, it's up to the principals. Because, and we've had, you know, with Stephen, the union guy, a couple of us have had a meeting or two with the principal that has gone not very far as her agreeing and helping us, allowing us to come up with any solutions.
So I guess just a question, Claire, what you're hoping for from the school district is maybe trying to avoid situations where anyone has to do kind of a hybrid, like teaching both online and in-person students, and instead just having sort of one or the other for each teacher? Is that what you're?
That would be good. And also having agency, having any kind of, so like when the school decides for the first month from September to October, that we're going to be virtual and all families, no families can come in, that's their decision. And then the families have to stay home. But then, somebody has their sound on. But then it's, but then when it's like, oh my gosh, my husband has just returned, you know, and I'm telling them this ahead of time, my husband has just returned from moving his mom from one nursing facility to another. I don't want to expose the kids. I know it's not a safe thing for me to do to come in. So I'm telling you this. And they refuse to allow me to continue to teach remotely. Then it's like, okay, when you say you have to teach remotely, or you at least the kids can't go into the school, then it's okay. Then it's mandatory, you're in your favor. But when I say that I can't do this out of, you know, because it's not safe for the kids, then it's like they don't even pay me for it. Most people got approved for first semester accommodations. I was not one of them. I applied but did not get approved. So, but with the press, with the encouragement of the union and other sources, I continued to teach from home in October for 2 or 3 weeks, and I never got paid. Even though the union was like, we will have your back, we'll do what we can, blah, blah, blah. They never paid me for that. They stole my pay. And they didn't even tell me when they took away my pay that they were doing this, that they were, you know, they didn't tell me, hey, we are not expecting you, you cannot go online. They didn't tell me I wasn't even allowed to teach, because I was teaching. I was teaching with the majority of the families online, and I was doing, you know, everything a teacher does except for going on in person. And then the week after Thanksgiving, I think it was, everyone was required once again to stay home. But that was because the school board decided, you know, and when they decided, then everyone had to stay home out of it, a quote, abundance of caution. And then a week after a winter break, and then 2 more weeks, and then everybody could stay home, but they didn't have to. So all of this changing, and it's all about what the shots being called by the administration. So I don't know exactly what I'm asking for besides agency on the part of staff members. And I feel I've talked a long time, and I see Howard has his hand up. Go ahead, Howard.
This is a quick question, and if it's out of order and where we want to go, just feel free to move on from it. And maybe it's too soon to ask this. Who has the actual power to allow you to have the agency, and who has the actual power, who is the actual power to make these decisions that have been made? Who is actually driving that, and who has the power there? I guess that's my question.
That is an excellent question, and that is exactly what is being hidden, I believe, from us. You know, I feel like the principals take credit when things happen for the benefit of the kids, but when it doesn't, then, like in my case, the principal was blaming it on the higher up, you know, blaming it on human resources or something. But when I've talked to school board members, whether it's written or over the phone, the response I get is their hands are tied. Their hands are tied. The principal's hands are tied. Because what I've been like campaigning for basically all school year long is that the principals stand up to the TEA. because teachers aren't heard. They're just heard as whining. But if the principals stood up, if enough people stood up, then there could be a change. But the principals are, I think, meek and not willing to do that. And so when I talk about this concern to the school board, their answer is that they, you know, then it's like, well, the superintendent's hands are tied. She could get fired. And so they take it up to, instead of, you know, like everybody going down to serve the student, everybody's going up to serve the higher up. So I don't know if that answers your question. It doesn't really, it just speaks.
Well, it's okay. So it sounds to me like we're saying is it the TEA? Is the TEA really
I would say TEA and the state attorney general are the ones calling the shots. And because the TEA is the one that makes these random rules that says that, oh, if you go virtual only, then you only get 50%. So then you have to make up that time. That's a TEA rule. Other states don't have that rule. The TEA, I think, I would say, to answer your question more briefly, I would say it's mostly the TEA. And the TEA blames it on the attorney general and the attorney, but nobody's accepting responsibility. But I would say it's ultimately the TEA, Mike Morath.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with you there. From what I understand and talking, I have, you know, a friendship with one particular board member. The TEA in Texas is taking a very political, hardline, right-wing approach. And they have been all along. And if we know anything about the Texas Attorney General, you know what a nutcase he is. So between the two of them, they have put the school board and therefore the superintendent really, the superintendent really has all control over hiring and who gets to be where. The school board can only fire the superintendent, and they're not going to do that. They just hired her. They can pressure the superintendent, but the superintendent by her contract is empowered to do all 100% of personnel decisions. But the superintendent is faced with TEA saying, TEA controls, first you have to know, the state contribution and all federal contributions to schools in Texas go through the TEA. So it's a huge portion of AISD's budget. So if TEA says, I'm just picking a number, the $100 a day per student enrolled, and they pay by the day that students attend. So they have to take attendance. If they say, we're not paying you the $100 a day unless 50% of your students are there in person, or whatever arbitrary number they pick, the school board is out millions of dollars. So that's the back against the wall situation they're in. And then you've got the other pressures of parents who want kids back in school. And now you've even got the Biden administration pushing to get kids back in school. So it's going to be very, very hard to resist those pressures, especially in Texas, where the TEA controls enough dollars that a school district cannot go against it. If we want to do any lobbying, I suggest it's the TEA and get their names. The school board members are certainly not ones who want to open the schools prematurely. The other thing is that the Attorney General issued a ruling, I forget when, probably in October or so, that said school districts cannot make the decision to stay closed. Only their health officer in this appropriate area can require that. So the school district doesn't even have an agency. Just so you know what a mess this is. That's enough.
If I could just make a quick request to everybody, if you're not actively speaking, if you could mute yourself, just since we do sometimes get some stray noise and echo going on. I guess one follow-up I have to Steve, and this is something I worry about, is I'm not super knowledgeable about this question. I'm worried it's entering into the filter of American partisanship, this question, and which turns it into like liberals say schools stay closed, conservatives say schools open, and then like we just get like, okay, we have to keep these schools closed because we're liberals, so we have to keep them closed. And I don't actually think that's a good way to think about this at all. Like this is, I honestly, I think there's, at least, I haven't, again, I'm not super knowledgeable about this, but I've been seeing some things that transmission amongst younger children is actually really not as big a problem as we maybe thought it was earlier in the pandemic. Like that there really we haven't been seeing the sort of mass transmission in these sort of, especially younger grades that we were worried about. I mean, rightfully worried about earlier on, but the evidence isn't there really. And that we actually, that the developmental benefits of opening up, having the younger kids, especially back in school, are so large that really this is something that it would be right to sort of be working towards, and that we shouldn't get into a mindset of like, we're liberals, we're against this, end of story.
Yeah, Liz, go ahead.
My main concern is education of our kids. And what scares me, what I would like to see changed is the situation in Austin where a teacher who is teaching hybrid. Because teaching hybrid to small children really seems like a challenge that no one should have to face. And the children really do lose out in that situation. As Claire has described to us, when she has to go in with a hood and a mask, and the kids who are virtual can't see her, and the kids who are in the classroom are not really being served because they're mostly running around because she's trying to pay attention to the hybrid stuff some of the time. This is not a good situation, and there's got to be some solutions to that. I think we're really not going to be able to solve this here, but I think that it may be that we really do need to join others who are pressuring TEA to give more agency to local school boards. That's one thing, and local superintendents. But the other thing is, I think maybe that we need to suggest bringing some experts in who can look at this educationally and maybe give some publicity to good solutions that are being used in other places, because there got to be a better solution than the solution that. There really has to be some better solutions. And we are going to be in this COVID situation. Teachers, well, it'll be really good when all the teachers get vaccinated. In many states, I'm hearing that the teachers are coming, in many places, I'm not even sure it's states, the teachers are coming right after health workers in terms of getting vaccinated. And that makes tremendous sense. I mean, we could easily use some of our vaccinations to vaccinate the teachers in Austin. And then it's the children may not get sick very often, but when the children bring it into the schools and hurt their teachers and cause their teachers to have to they'll still have to wear masks, but probably hoods won't be necessary if they get vaccinated. So I think that we're going to be with this for a long time, from what I can see, from what they're now talking about. And I think we need to find those useful, positive solutions that we can use. And so it's not, my concern isn't even for the teachers or the kids or the education. It's really for all of it, for the entire community. Because if a teacher gets exposed, they come back to their family, and that, that's a problem too.
Can I?
Go ahead, Terry.
Well,
Terry, you want to?
Okay, yeah. Well, as to whether there's a liberal or a conservative opinion on this, I think we're going to start seeing some better, I know we are going to start seeing some better guidance on the national level, because the positions that are being developed are nuanced and they're not going to follow some stereotype. The thing that needs to be handled better is that we're so focused, and as we should be, on the welfare of the children and their educational development and their health safety, that the welfare of the teachers keeps falling off the edge of the discussion. And it shouldn't. It needs to be central to the discussion. And my hit right now, though I don't really know much about this, is that the vaccinations are critical to this. If teachers are viewed as critical frontline workers, they should be vaccinated before a lot of people are getting vaccinated right now, and have the protections and privileges that they need to survive in their lives.
I'd like to speak to vaccinations really quick. I got vaccinated one time, but my first shot a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. But the thing is that before Biden got in, teachers who applied for accommodations were sent out this email and had 1 day to respond to get vaccinated. And I responded, but by the time I responded, it was too late. You're not in group 1A. So sorry. So sad. So sorry. And that was an AISD organized thing. And then a month later, I get this another blast saying, come get vaccinated. Do it now. Act now. And it had AISD's name on it. And I totally hesitated because everything AISD, like when I got tested 2 times, and was negative, I was like, woohoo, glad to hear it, blah, blah, blah. But then they said, oh, because our teachers and our staff are doing so well, you guys have to go back into work now after the 2-week period. So again, they took the data and they manipulated it to their advantage to say, well, because you're negative, even though we're still in stage 5, because, they were encouraging people to stay home. So of course the numbers went down. So I really, I'm all about vaccines, but when it was a partnership with the city of Austin and AISD, I really had to hesitate. And it took me a long time, a lot of soul searching, not a long time because I had to act immediately. But it took me a lot of soul searching to decide to go ahead with it because I've been screwed over so many times by AISD and how they manipulate data.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering how AISD did what it did, as you described it, when teachers aren't within the definition provided by the governor for 1A and 1B. I'm wondering how AISD even offered the vaccine to teachers like that. And my second wondering is if there's been any organized effort on the state level and with the governor's office to get teachers vaccinated, get them higher up in the governor's list of priorities, because that's where a real change could happen just like that statewide. If the governor is convinced to change his categories, which he is already, like Texas's inclusion of 65 and over in 1B is unique compared to other states. I mean, so Abbott can do what he wants, and some effective lobbying there might make a real difference. I'm just curious about those two things, how AISD was able to do what it wanted at the outset of this and offer the vaccine to teachers, even though teachers didn't qualify under the governor's rules, and then what's going on to affect the governor's rules at this point.
Well, the first time they offered it was just to people in 1B, and I think it was only like 1,000 people, and they said, don't share this link, you'll be in serious trouble if you share this link. And it had to do with, I think, the 1,000, literally 1,000 teachers who applied for accommodations and were denied. And so we were put in group 1B because that's what CDC said, and that's what the doctor said, group 1B, high risk, But the second time was more, I don't think it was just, according to the doctor who I spoke to, who gave me the shot, she said, this is for everybody at AISD. It wasn't just people who applied for accommodations and didn't get them. But beyond that, I don't know the details.
The first one was Ascension Health. Ascension Health had received an allotment for distribution amongst themselves, and they reached out to AISD and said, do you have some high-risk people that need vaccinated? This was well documented in the Statesman when it happened the first week of January.
Howard, you had your hand up.
Anybody got an answer to my second
Scalia,
question?
that was Scalia. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I just want to affirm for people who have never worked in the school system, that under the best of circumstances, the sense of being able to make logical decisions with your supervisors and things like that, under the best of circumstances, it's you can get your dice and you throw them, and that's what you got. You know, it makes as much sense as that in making decisions. And as you said, oftentimes the decisions are to work with to look good for those that are your supervisors, so that you can get that promotion that you so much want and need to raise your families and things like that. So my heart goes out, you know, from that standpoint. The idea of doing two jobs at the same time, yeah, there's I can remember at a former school I went to, they were having cutbacks, so they started talking about Mission Impossible, people holding down 2 and 3 jobs, you know, because they had to slash jobs and things like that. So people were having to take on 2 or 3 jobs, and they were trying to promote it as something that was good, and look at your hero, you know, and we need to knock out that type of language altogether. It's inappropriate to do 2 jobs. It's enough to do, if you do 1 job well, you are a hero, you know, really, when it comes to kids. And so I just, my heart just goes out to the thought of doing 2 jobs. And I think if I was to say anything, that's where we're breaking labor laws. We are, you know, unless you're gonna pay people twice the pay for doing 2 jobs at the same time, you're doing a labor thing. And so you're just not, and you're not treating your people right, not with respect. And I had that, I had to deal with it until I did something I never thought I ever would do, and I quit. And quitting kids is something I don't do, but I did, you know, and I quit them and I quit the school. And so it hurts to hear and to know that teachers are not able to be safe. So but I am happy to know that finally teachers are looked at as maybe essential workers. And so that's a good start. But the second thing is we need to say, doing 2 jobs is not the job of a teacher. Teaching kids is and doing it appropriately, and that needs to be looked at school by school basis, sure, but not 2 jobs. You do 1 and do it well. And it's the only way to do it.
Thank you. Let's go, Erica, and then we can go back to Walter and see if anybody knows the second question.
I don't know if anything's been done at the governor's level. I did share with Claire yesterday. I saw a post on one of our neighborhood groups from a substitute teacher who had been in schools that were doing both hybrid teaching and virtual only, in classroom only teaching. And he was very, very specific that the hybrid teaching was not working whenever he was in these substitute situations. It was just too difficult to focus on children in the classroom and on the screen. And in our the Leander School District, in fact, to my knowledge, there are only virtual teachers or only in classroom teachers. At least that's the case at our elementary school. And that, and as far as I've heard, I haven't seen anything on our LISD parents thing or anything that said anything different, that there's been any hybrid teaching. But it's so far it seems to be working, and I don't hear a lot of pushback from the teachers because they're able to focus on doing what they need to do with the group of children that they're working with directly.
Does anybody know the answer to Walter's? What was your second question, Walter?
Oh, just what efforts are being made on the top of the state level with the governor's office to get the category fixed so that teachers could be included in 1B or, moved up in the.
Yeah, I dropped into the chat a recent news article. Vicki Goodwin is leading an effort to get the governor to change 1B.
Liz, you want to go?
This is really a good discussion, and unfortunately, we're not going to change the. We can try and change. I think it's a very good idea to try and change the governor's classification so that teachers can get. And we've come up with some really good ideas. I had an idea that if we could get some of the educators at the university. At the university level, to write some things, some of the people in the ed school, to write some things for the newspapers and things, where we had specialists saying that hybrid education for elementary school kids does not work. I think that might be a good way to go. And I don't know whether who we could identify, but it seems to me, our little meeting, one of the things is we have Mary Ellen Isaacs in our meeting, and maybe getting in touch with her and getting her to know. I mean, she can't do it herself, but maybe she can point out people who can. Steve, is what I'm thinking. Okay.
Ted might be able to identify some too.
True. And then the other question, the other idea that I think really might be important, I did this when Claire asked me to before, is for some of us to get on the get the things from the union about testifying with the school board, because even though the school board can't do that much, at least then that testifying was really, it was pretty satisfying. You just record what you're going to say before the meeting. And even if the school board doesn't have a lot of agency in this, hearing what we have to say is really important for them.
And it also, if there's other public members watching and listening, it also informs the public, because there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation or no information out there about what's going on. I just want to say about the word hybrid, that terminology, if you guys use that, maybe I just misunderstood it, but I used to think hybrid meant more like families could choose, or 2 times a week they would be in person, and then 2 times a week and 3 times a week they would be at home. So if you're using that word and communicating with school board members or whoever, just make sure you're defining the term as, what we've been talking about, which is that you can't be doing both at the same time. That's how we're defining hybrid. Erica, who else did you say might be able to help besides?
Mary Ellen's husband, Ted, is a child psychologist.
Okay, thanks. What were you going to say, Liz?
Actually, I was going to say something. Can you hear me?
Mary,
Can you hear me?
Hand up is all I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Mary just said, go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah, you can go ahead, or I will. My comment is very simple. Getting on the 1B list is not a panacea. There are over 500,000 people on the list. So far, they've got 100,000 shots going. I can't get my 95-year-old mother vaccinated yet, who qualifies on several categories. The equity involved in this and the inequity is more than enough to go around. I don't know if you've heard, but so far, white folks have got almost all the shots, and they do not have almost all the disease. And everybody's going on the get mine now system. Nobody's waiting because somebody else deserves it more than I do. and I speak for myself, I got my first shot yesterday, but I couldn't defer that shot to my mother. I couldn't defer it to somebody else who needed it more. All I could do was take it.
Thank you, Mary. That's a really important point, I think. Sarah?
This is just, you know, I'm speaking totally from ignorance, so I apologize that this is so off base, but I'm wondering why there's this belief that the children at an elementary school level need to have an entire year's worth of education this year. Like, why can't they have half a year of education? Somehow, in the long run, they'll catch up, okay? If they only needed 1/2 of a year of education, a lot of these problems would go away. You know, you do the math, you know? So why are we as a society not seeing this differently? That's all I was gonna say.
Childcare is one thing.
It is, it's one thing.
I guess another thing just to that point, I've read a little bit about, so a lot of times they'll see sort of educational inequality, especially between sort of more affluent and poor children. They'll be like going along together, then summer break will come along and the poorer kids will fall behind a lot during the summer, just because they don't have access to the other sort of enrichment activities. They really are dependent on the schools. And so that those sort of long breaks are the time when educational inequality really tends to get amplified. So if we lost a whole half year of education, it might be a time when more affluent students continue to get their enrichment activities and continue to develop, and the poorer kids really, really fell behind even more than they do already in the summer times.
I want to just turn my attention a little bit to what keeps me going and inspires me. And that's two things that I want to say about that. And one is I heard a quote from Reverend Barber that people don't cheat you because they can beat you in a fair fight. And then I forget the punchline. But that criticism really resonated with me, or that, you know, identifying of what's really going on is, you know, it's not because, you know, this is a fair playing field. And then the other thing is the Chicago teacher strike. I know, like Steve mentioned, you know, it's not the Biden administration, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know the latest, as in, you know, today, but they still were at a standstill. And I know they have a real progressive mayor, but she was getting really, you know, what do you call it? She was getting really frustrated with the teachers. But I don't blame them. I don't blame the teachers one bit. And they're because they're, you know, they're making sure all the teachers get vaccinated. That's one of the things they want. That's one of the things they're demanding before reopening schools. And they're looking at the families, and they're looking at, you know, everything. They're looking at the big picture instead of, so anyway, I find a lot of inspiration in knowing that there's at least one little group out there, the third largest school district in the country, that's saying, we don't know if we can go along with this, guys, even to the Democrats.
I so appreciate your sharing with us, Claire. And I felt really that Galia's I was really glad that Galia shared from her heart too. And I think that the Peace and Social Concerns Committee needs to go back and maybe come up with some very concrete suggestions that of what members of the meeting can do, because we do have agency. We all have agency. It's a very frustrating time for everybody. It really is. And I appreciate what Mary said a lot, because this is totally unfair the way things are going. But, you know, actually, as a person of white privilege, I realize that, you know, I'm being touched by some of what a lot of people go through all the time. A lot of people that don't have white skin. So that piece of it also hits me a lot. So that I just think, this is all a very much of a learning time for a lot of us. And we have to recognize that the light will shine through. As Quakers, that's our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to beam that out to the world as much as we can.
Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to speak, or anybody who hasn't said much who wants to speak?
I'll just say one more thing. This is that I saw that I saw something from an immigrant child who was in resettlement camps for like 4 years, and they said, you know, I wasn't educated for those 4 years, but once I had the opportunity and was able to get back to it, I went ahead and I caught up. But it's the elementary school kids. It's really hard. It's really hard, no doubt.
Well, I'll extend an invitation to anyone who wants to join the Peace and Social Concerns Committee next Friday at 6 p.m. This will be on our agenda, and we can continue the conversation then if anyone wants to think about next steps.
I do have a question if anybody knows this. I mean, I know that it's that it seems the science seems to be suggesting that kids are not as big super spreaders as we thought they could be. But, you know, I have a lot of my students, I think all of them live in very tight quarters with very large families and multi-generational. A lot of them have grandparents in the household. And so my concern is, of course, as a teacher, but it's also the well-being of the families who, you know, the kids are maybe crawling on the floor or not. I mean, 5-year-olds can't practice social distancing. So there's that, you know, they just can't. They can't keep on their masks. They just can't. In the best of worlds, they cannot do that for 6 hours a day. So we're breaking those rules. But anyway, so they're you know, they're not practicing social distancing. They're not keeping on their masks. And then they go home. You know, is grandma at greater risk? I'm assuming yes. I haven't seen anything to the contrary about that.
I guess what the article, at least I was looking at, is from The Atlantic. I guess in addition to being less likely to experience serious illness, I guess they're also finding that younger children are less likely to transmit the COVID. So that would, I mean, of course, there definitely would still be risk of transmission. That's, but that it might not be as, I should read up a little bit more on this before, that it might not be as severe as it would be for older kids or for adults.
Okay, good to know.
Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. Shall we adjourn to prepare for meeting for worship? Thank you, Claire, and thanks, James, and thanks, everyone.